anniversary, as it will be termed, the birthday episode.
Oh, I didn't wear my hat. Damn.
That was the deal.
Sorry. And all my talk about hats and badges. Oh,
I feel slightly let down a little bit now.
I have a balloon.
Oh, ooh.
To prove it's my birthday.
And it's a helium one.
Yeah. Gosh, came out of the box.
Yeah. My son got a load of balloons from Poundland that are just all over the floor because I've had to blow them up.
Oh.
So they're not as posh as that.
And then they burst, and then you have to clean them up.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Not so fun. But hey, there we go. How's your week been?
Really busy, fun busy, doing new programs, looking at different interactions with different groups. So a new female leadership program started with UK Coaching last week, and we have 13 women in a WhatsApp group speaking about coaching, and they've only met each other for an hour. I'm sure they know each other through the game, but I was just so excited to see we create a WhatsApp group. That's a space that they wanted to work in and to get to know each other. And straight away, someone's asking a question. So for me in that, it was the excitement of us facilitating or creating a space, but then maybe the enthusiasm and eagerness and the need for someone to have that group and just straight away going, brilliant. So try not to overanalyze what we did, but trying to replicate something cool with other programs that we're doing. So that's one thing. And then the focus program deadline closed on Friday. So this cool program that now has 15 sports in it kicks off next week. So yeah, loads of programmy stuff, but just meeting new people, new sports coming on board. So yeah.
Nice. I had football Saturday with the under sevens.
Oh.
I've not officially kind of started running the team yet. So I'm still in the chat to parents on the side mode.
Okay.
Which was fine, and a new player came on Saturday, so did my bit to reach out and chat to the coach. The dad, the parent that was there. So that was interesting. Find out a little bit about him and his background. He works in the police. Log that one. If we get any parental issues on the side of the pitch, I shall be going to Bernie.
I thought you were going to talk about speeding tickets.
No, well, that's another one. That's useful. Yeah, that's useful. So that was good. So you're more of a sports parent role on Saturday morning, but then Sunday was rugby coaching.
Wow. Which
was really good. So my son was there, complained right from the start that his leg hurts. So I was like, oh, well, whereabouts? My whole leg. Okay, but maybe like narrow it down a bit. So we finally worked out. So he didn't really do a lot. So I was working with the head coach, and we had a group of 6. So Callum was just kind of upstanding with me. So I said, right, you can help coach. So we had Callum as a 7-year-old, 1 week into being 7, so he's a young 7-year-old, coaching the other 7-year-olds during the session. Oh. And so I said to him, right, let's watch this practice. So they were doing this little kind of 3v3 game at the time. 2v1 game, then a 3v3 game. And we can tell them about, some stuff that they did well, what was good. So he was able to watch what these other 6-7-year-old kids were doing and then feed back and give them some information on what they'd done well. And was able to particularly recognise that Charlotte, so there's 2 girls in the group of 30-odd, that Charlotte was really good at recognising where space was. So he then said, oh yeah, but she just did that really well. So I'm like, right, well, great, tell them. So anyone that talks about, well, kids, can't work with each other, or, they can't lead other kids, like we had a 7-year-old engaging with other kids to give them some feedback.
Oh, that is massive. What did you notice about yourself? Now, this is probably an easier question to you, but because I'm thinking of coaches who wouldn't be familiar doing this, but was there a concern that he would say the right or wrong thing? Maybe not because he's your son and you know him, but how would coaches get to that point where they kind of trust themselves to speak less, and that perception thing of the coaches, the parents watching, like anything else you noticed about that? I think that's fascinating.
Yeah, because I teed it up that he told me first.
He
told me what he had seen first.
Oh, okay, yeah.
So then I was almost able to filter whether it was worth telling the other kids or not.
Right. Okay. Yeah.
And interesting, right? So we talked about, there was this 3v3 game going on, and just to kind of give you the context, it was basically a netball / basketball kind of game, pass the ball any direction. So we weren't worried about forward passes or any of that. And you had to get the ball into a corner, so 4 corners, and you've got to get the ball into a corner to score, then attack a different corner. And Callum then said, why don't we make it harder by adding another ball into the practice?
Oh my God.
And I'm like, I've worked with coaches for years that would have never even considered making it like that. But I then had to talk to him about, great idea, that was going to make it too hard. You know? But he'd already started to think about how to change the practice.
That is just fascinating. I love it. And
but we assume that they can't do that.
But I'm even thinking of the other end and some of the senior men's teams I work with. Like how valuable that would be for them to come out and listen and hear what's happening and be able to feed back in and go, lads, listen, from this angle, that's not what we're seeing. You know, the kind of analyst head where you come up and get the bird's eye view versus what they're seeing, you know, on the ground in the POV. Like that is just brilliant. And the trust element, especially with a 7-year-old, but then there's a relatable element. You know, so there's like the coach is speaking or our friend, our teammate is speaking. Oh, that's a good idea. And, you know, that's brilliant. And go on. Yeah,
what I think was interesting was a couple of the points that he made is what we would have said as coaches anyway.
Oh, wow.
So the influence impact of it coming from one of their peers is something I've not really explored that before. Will they value it more from the fact that Matt or myself has said it, or will they value it from the fact that Callum has said it?
Yeah.
But they would value Callum as a rugby player because he's relatively successful because he's quite fast. So they would know from a performer perspective that he was probably ahead of some of the others at the moment. So therefore, would that change their perception of him because of that? I mean, it gets quite complex when you start to unpick it in that kind of way.
It really does. I wonder, could you get back to us in a couple of weeks' time when you explore that with Charlotte or some of your other players and see, you know, but then does it put them on a spot if they're a little bit more, if they're shy or they've kind of more introverted behaviors, like, and you put them in that spot, does that mean you have to do with everyone, or everyone feels left out, or everyone gets an injury and says they want to be in? I guess, you know, it presents itself differently with different groups of people, but I just love that concept. You know, even like the idea, we talk a lot in the sessions about coming out and pausing and breaking and then the transitioning. Like when you were saying there, you were talking to parents, like the whole statement of where does coaching take place, or the question rather, like, is that coaching? Is you having a chat with the parents about the game coaching, how your day was, the connection with the relationship with their son or daughter, leading you into that frame of mind of here's the session, here's where they're coming from, I got some information on how their day or week has been, is all, or is it just on the grass between 10 and 11 or 10 and 12:30? Or
yeah, well, it's definitely not, is it?
No, yeah. But we do become kind of accustomed to that. Like I rock up, I'm, you know, this is the window we've coaching for, and then we leave.
So then, as per normal, this isn't what we plan on talking about. No. So then, right, so Callum is quite confident as a young boy, and will tell you what he thinks. So does that afford him the space to be able to then feel confident that he can feed back and give some support to peers? But so in that group of kids, Joseph is a bit quieter. So he may not have been willing to step forward and offer some feedback. B, we as coaches, as Matt and I in that moment, may not have afforded him the space to do it because we might have thought he can't do it, but actually he's probably got some things to say. And if long term we want to use sport as the vehicle to develop better people, when do we start giving them the space to be able to input and say what they think? Because this would say to me that they have got some things to say.
Yeah. I could nearly bank on it from this, only mainly from the school system, and some years and years ago setting up a club with my dad at home, that everyone will have something to say. It's the position and timing of it. So like, you know, like you're Cal's dad, so there's a little bit of a, I can say anything to you, and I will, and you've supported me in being myself, which we don't know that all children unfortunately have that background. Then there's also the opportunity of him coming beside you, which is in some kids' eyes probably a privilege to be in that spot. So is this going to be a regular? Do I need to say the best thing? But the age group would matter based on, that was the particular age group I did my master's on, that cusp of 7 to 9-year-old boys actually, and around their self-perception and physical activity spaces. But I think, and I feel strongly, that if you were to do that and it was just a one-to-one, you'd be creating that space for them to say anything. So you frame it, and having them beside you to say, we're going to spend a couple of minutes. Let me know what you see here. Now, even if it says that Cal runs really fast, it's not a right or wrong. It's them feeling that they can contribute. All right, thanks a million. You get back in there. Or maybe for the others, encouraging with a question. How many passes can you see? Did it go to a particular side? What do you think that means? You know, I don't know, like, is that a waste of time going too far into that? People could argue that they're coming away from the game space, so they're missing out. But I think back to the brilliant point you made there, we're developing people. How cool is it to go and do something different in a session, you know?
Yeah. I think the hard bit for me was I hadn't planned to do this. It was only because he turned up whinging about his leg that, and for context, he was with his mum at that weekend. Hence, it wasn't the fact that I didn't know this. It was just that he'd been with his mum that weekend. So that was the first time I'd seen him on that kind of Sunday morning. And then he said, "Oh, I played football all day yesterday." So he kind of then explained, basically he was a bit tired, really. So I'd not planned to use an injured player to support the coaching process. It was more thinking on my feet to keep him engaged in doing something. It was either that or he went home.
Yeah.
And I would always much rather he was there.
Yeah.
I have done it previously. I can think back. So I might have spoken about this kid called James a few years back. So I used to run an under 7s, under 8s football team. And I did it as a half-time task. So I'd said to the subs, and James was one of them. James was an under 7. And there was James and another kid. I can't remember who the other kid was. And I gave them a whiteboard and said, right, at half time, you're going to give the feedback to start with to the other children. So I left them to it, and I said, right, what I want you to think about is giving them a score of how well you think they've done. So passing, and I'd written 0, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. And then shooting 1 to 10. And I said, right, what I want you to do is then give them a score about how well you think they've done. So I left them to it, and I sat in my chair and watched the rest of the kids playing. And they were sat on the floor scribbling on the whiteboard. And then the kids came off, and I'd not checked what they were doing on the whiteboard. So they sat there, and they came over and they held the whiteboard up, but with a back to it, so I couldn't see what was on it. So I said, well, James and Aaron and another kid, Aaron, we're looking at your passing and shooting, so they've given you a score. So what have you got for passing, James? Right, we think their passing was 5 out of 10. Right, okay, well, why do you think that? Well, because of this. And they were able to say they didn't think it was a 10 because of this. So I then spoke to the rest of the kids and said, right, if our passing is a 5, what are we going to do to get our passing to be a 7 in the second half? So that was all we concentrated on, was how do we move it from a 5 to a 7? And I said, right, what have you got for shooting? And they said, well, for shooting, we've got a 3 because we haven't scored any goals yet, but we've had some shots. I said, right, okay, cool. Right, so how do we get more shots in the second half to move our shooting from a 3 to a 5? And then James said, I've got something else on the board as well. So I was like, oh, that's interesting. So he turned it round, and he'd written poo on the bottom of the board, and then 0 to 10. And he circled 0 because that was the amount of poos that the players had in the first half. Now, all you can do as a coach, right, is you've just got to go with it, and take the learning for yourself, which was the first two bits work, but check what's going on underneath before you start to get them to feed back. So I've definitely tried it before with little ones, and it can work, and you get a level of feedback, but definitely check what's coming before you opening it up publicly to the whole group of kids.
Oh, that is absolutely brilliant. But you know, if you map that over to senior teams or maybe, you know, more experienced players, you still have it coming through, maybe not in the poo sense or summary, but the extra bit from them. You know, the extra bit of word that has no added value. It's just them offloading their frustration. I'm sure it has some value to maybe one or two people who are closer, or there's a nugget in there somewhere eventually. But that is so funny. Oh, what a chance. You're going, oh, I had them, but oh.
Yeah. So how would you set this up in a different sport that, you know, that wasn't a team sport, for example? What's your thoughts on how could you include it in that kind of way?
Well, I was thinking there about a British cycling session that I was at a little while ago, probably a year now at this stage, year and a half, where we're over in the Vela Park there in East London, and there's track sessions. There's 35 athletes, and they're split, and they, in between the circuits, you know, one is coming off onto the ground and they're having some breakout sessions. Some parts of it is kind of knowledge intake, others is Q&A, others is getting back ready on the rollers to go back out. I think, you know, at that time when I observed, there was really good utilization of the time, and the camaraderie was amazing. Something that stood out around the coach knowing what his role was in that space. So they came off, there was a level of maturity. You're talking about 13, 14-year-old boys, so a bit older in this case, but like chatting about, they competed against each other the weekend before from different clubs all over the South. But when they got together, they were like, hey, Nick, how'd you do that thing there when we were doing that move? What position do you put your head in for that? And I was fascinated watching them to come over here. And there was a couple of different coaches then as the day went on that took these breakout sessions. So they were timed, the detail and the planning was meticulous, but you could see the different dynamics with different coaches evoking different types of conversations. Some groups were really quiet and it was coach led. Others had the chits and chats going on. It was absolutely amazing. And the coach not saying much, but kind of nudging with a word every so often. But I think that the balance part of that for me, when thinking of it, even from swimming point of view, would be the nature of where they're at in the environment and what opportunities that affords them. So if you're in this cycling environment or a tri environment, there's a break. So you get to come in and you huddle together and there's a space. Swimming, the noise or the sound might not travel as much, but they could go to the end of the pool, but you've got your 6 lanes and usually divided up by performance or experience or level. So I do think it could work, but I think it would have to be normalized. And there's one element that's sticking out in my head around, if you were to try this for a period of time to explore it as a once-off or a couple of times in a year, brilliant. And then the other side would be around injured players, which you mentioned there. Like, again, age group kind of mindful, but like thinking of West Ham last year, I asked the question, why are the injured players in the dressing room and in the physio room during training? So why are we bringing the bikes to the side of the pitch? Why aren't we having people listening to what the coaches and managers are saying and picking up bits and pieces? So they're, you know, you have a whole day as a player to go and do bits and pieces. So some of that was changed, and where injuries allowed people to have that space. But yeah, sorry, there's probably not a succinct answer there, but I'm just floating with the idea of doing it and having people feedback, because I do think when you're in a lane, say in swimming, you just get in, the set's up, you're having a conversation like this, there's a bit of noise around here, there's congestion at the end of the lane when you finish your set, and then you've got to go again. But if you pulled them out to have a look for X amount of time in a session, are they critiquing others when their own technique is different? So anyway, I wonder where it would be beneficial in some sports at some times and not in others.
Yeah, especially if they might be more novice in a real technical sport. You know, it might be quite difficult if they don't have their own kind of model of performance nailed down for them to be able to give information to others. You know, think about, you know, so Callum, when he goes to play golf, he definitely wouldn't be able to give some golf information to another kid. about a technical bit, but I wonder where the tactical bit, because there will certainly be some game playing bits they can share some thoughts on, or even just the behaviour bits as well. But then the next question I think that jumped out as you were talking there was how do we work with coaches to change their mindset to allow players to feed back to other players?
So where my head's at here on this, because I was thinking about this at the very start, if people's why for being a coach is about people development, or the development of the whole person, then it should be just the knowledge that this can be done and is useful for them to go, oh yeah, it's a good idea, I'll try it. And then maybe here's some examples of how it's been tried. Great, thank you. Because they see that linking to like what Colin Cronin says about care and coaching, the long-term impact, the relationship, where some people that you deal with, whatever age group they are, may have not had a question asked of them that day, may have just been asked me, you know, all those stuff we spoke about before in other episodes. So you're creating an opportunity, which I saw at this British cycling session, for 13, 14-year-olds to make eye contact with their peers and with other adults, speak in a respectful manner, digest what's just happened to them, seek confidently a question or vulnerably that's a word, of others. So one part is, if your why is to develop the person, it's easier. And I know some performance people might say, gosh, well, there's a lot of other hats I have to wear. But the other side of it is the confidence to do it in a space where you're being watched. So you've just taken up a role as a coach, or you're a young coach in, and you've got an hour, 60 minutes, there's parents watching, there's other coaches, you're in an assistant coach role last year, and now you've got a head coach role or responsibility. I think that's about the confidence element, and maybe, you know, sharing an idea with somebody, or having a better environment to thrive in and to thrive as a coach. But I do think it's easy to set it up, and whether you say from our team angle, I could easily say to the coach of the senior team, hey, listen, I really think this is something to explore. See how it goes with a couple of players, pull them out, watch. But it's the timing of it, how you utilize, how you frame it, that maybe for different age groups can be the right or wrong time. Or like you had with the whiteboards, what do you notice? I noticed rambling there, I noticed as an analyst, for one of the teams I work with, if there's a couple of people hanging around, I won't get them to do it on a regular basis, because I don't want to shift them completely to numbers and this kind of mindset of being an analyst. But what I've found is, if they help me out for a game, all of a sudden they're critiquing with a sharper eye, with some numbers at halftime, and sharing this back, instead of the lads, come on, get stuck in, what are you doing, you know? Anyway, sorry, rambling enthusiastically there.
Yeah, I think the good point in there, though, was you wouldn't do it every week with every player, or the same player every week. Otherwise, you're basically developing a coach, not a player.
So what are your thoughts then on the long-term impact of this?
Well, I mean, I think it will help them be better players. So thinking specifically to the context of rugby, with the example that we talked about, I think it will help them be better players, because they will start to appreciate strengths in other people. So when it then comes to the game, they are able to then know what the strengths of other people are, to allow them to bring out their strengths better. And I think that, you know, all the way back to, so when my wife was away with England under 21s football team, she did a task at the Euros so all the players had like plain t-shirts on, and the players wrote on other people's t-shirt what they thought they were good at, you know, and being under 21 and, you know, too cool for school, you know, you'd have like unbelievable techers like written across the back of them and stuff. But when they came to the first game at the Euros, that was all that t-shirt was hung on their peg in the changing room. So as soon as you go in for your first game, what you're getting hit with is all your strengths. And I think in a little way with that, so Charlotte went away from that moment, probably with with an extra dose of self-confidence jabbed into her and a bit of self-esteem, because it had been noted by one of the other players there that she'd done something good.
Mm-hmm.
So I think there's a real benefit to that, that lifts people up. But I think there's definitely some benefits long term for them in terms of in terms of their game understanding, because they'll start to recognize and reinforce the stuff that is good and that will help them, be better at the game and win the game.
Yeah. And it's a different kind of link to it, but it reminded me of like when I'm on like TikTok or Instagram and I see these life hacks and they go, oh my goodness, how did I get to this new age and not know this? And I think it's that kind of angle of like somebody else saw this, there's a different, if I stand back for a second, how did I not notice that? And then they're building it's part of their biography, the journey they're on, building that bank of information, recalling it and having space to digest it, that'll hopefully log it in the long-term memory. And it's part of that learning process for them to, to see it. I think there's loads of benefits in there, but it's maybe supporting people on how to do it, when to do it, without maybe overanalyzing it, but just like use it, explore it, see what happens,
Yeah, I definitely also think, because it was unplanned and unscripted, I think, so Matt, that was leading the session as the coach, I think we should have a conversation as coaches to know that, because Matt's view at the moment was he's the coach, he delivers the information. And I probably should have worked better with Matt to say the first bit of information we'll get will be from Callum, but it is filtered, so we're not going to get talk of poos. And actually that's okay and really important for all the reasons we've talked about. So I think there's probably some stuff, if you're working in a team of coaches, that is valued, the input from players into different ways. And I guess my challenge really is kind of coming towards the end now. My challenge for coaches would be, try it, but plan for it better than I did, than an unscripted off the cuff kind of thing. But plan for it to get the input from the kids into the session, because they give you a different lens and there's a lot of real good value to it.
Yeah. So if you're in a sport that can work and you see it really clearly from this conversation, brilliant. If you don't, would you say a good starting point could be that before the session starts, the voice of all of the people in front of you needs to be heard? I'm not talking about a camp of 200 kids on a, Easter break or summer break or whatever, but if you've got 25 kids, 15 kids in front of you, 30, that their voice is heard. So that silence is broken to get some sort of like vocal interaction moving, to see if that makes a difference, and then possibly lead on, even though they're not directly linked of what they'll be seeing. But maybe some sports afford the opportunity quickly and easier to do that. But might be a nice starting point.
Definitely. And very rarely, unless you're a brand new participant at a brand new sport that you've never seen before, like most of the time, kids will have done many of the things that you're about to do in that session before in some kind of way. So even if it's a real simple, right, today we're going to be working on this in 2s or 3s, just have a chat about what does that mean? How does that link to stuff that we've done before? So we can start to talk about that, jargon, like that spiral curriculum. So refer them back to some stuff that they've done on this topic a while back. So you're starting to get in that sharing of information between them. And all you're doing as a coach is just listening to picking up, do they understand this topic in the way that I think that they do?
Yeah.
Or maybe not.
Brilliant.
But yeah, definitely give it a try and give us some feedback on how it went.
Yeah, absolutely. What a great point to finish on. So, and we'd love to hear it through our Twitter. Or our email address. So at Coach Convo, find us on Twitter, comment on any of the stuff from today or any of those ways you've tried it. We'd love to hear if it's worked, not worked, and we can bring that back into the next episode. coachconversation@gmail.com. You get the link down below. Send us some topics you're interested in or scenarios that occur in your sessions, conversations that worked well or didn't work well, or any critique in the comments from the session, the episode today or last episode. Bring it on. We'd love to hear it and have a chat about it. So thanks for joining us. We'll see you next week and have a lovely week. The sun is out. Hope you're getting some fresh air, and happy coaching. Till next week. Bye.
Bye.